It was a blistering July afternoon in 2019, the kind that made the air shimmer and the sidewalks of Willow Creek, a manicured suburb nestled in the heart of America, sizzle underfoot. Children laughed in sprinkler-soaked yards, and the scent of charcoal grills hung heavy. But beneath this postcard of suburban bliss, a darkness was brewing, one that would tear apart families, shatter illusions, and leave a community haunted for years to come. At the heart of this tragedy were the Caldwells, Nathan, a 45-year-old investment banker whose relentless drive had earned him respect, and Clara, his 43-year-old wife, a part-time yoga instructor whose radiant smile masked a growing void. Next door lived the Morrows, Margaret, a soft-spoken widow, and her 19-year-old son, Ethan, a college sophomore home for the summer. No one in Willow Creek could have imagined that these ordinary lives would collide in a catastrophe of passion, betrayal, and bloodshed. Nathan Caldwell was a man forged in ambition. Born to factory workers in a sleepy Iowa town, he'd clawed his way to the top through sheer grit, his blue-collar roots fueling a hunger for success. By his mid-30s, he was a rising star at Pinnacle Wealth Management, his sharp mind and no-nonsense demeanor winning over clients and colleagues alike. His days were a blur of boardrooms and late-night emails, his suits as crisp as his calculations. But success came at a cost. Nathan was rarely home before the stars came out, his mind tethered to markets and mergers even when he was. Clara Bennett, as she was known before marrying Nathan, had walked a different path. Raised in a bohemian household by a literature professor and a painter, she'd grown up surrounded by poetry and possibility. At university, she'd chased dreams of modern dance, her body a vessel for stories told in motion. But a devastating knee injury in her final year stole that future, forcing her to pivot to yoga and wellness coaching. It was at a charity gala in 2003 that their worlds collided. Nathan, polished but awkward, was captivated by Clara's effortless charm, her laughter like a melody he couldn't forget. For Clara, Nathan was an anchor, a promise of stability that would let her nurture her passions without fear of want. They married in a lavish ceremony that set tongues wagging, their union the envy of Willow Creek's elite. The early years were golden. Nathan's career soared, and he took pride in giving Clara the life he believed she deserved, a sprawling colonial home, weekends at the country club, and the freedom to pursue her yoga practice. Clara, in turn, became the perfect corporate wife, hosting elegant dinner parties and charming Nathan's clients with her warmth. Her yoga classes at Serenity Studio drew a devoted following, her students drawn to her grace and infectious energy. But as the years piled on, the shine began to fade. Nathan's hours grew longer, his ambition a relentless taskmaster. He'd come home to find Clara asleep, his phone buzzing with emails as he sat alone in the dark. Clara, nearing her 40s, felt a restlessness she couldn't name. The yoga classes, the charity boards, the endless social obligations, they all felt like roles in a play she no longer believed in. She wondered if she'd traded her dreams for a life that looked perfect but felt hollow. The couple's inability to have children, despite years of trying, cast a shadow over their marriage. Each negative test was a silent wound, deepening the chasm between them. By the summer of 2019, the Caldwells were a study in pretense. To the outside world, they were Willow Creek's golden couple, Nathan, on the cusp of a partnership at Pinnacle, Clara, the serene yogi whose classes were booked weeks in advance. But behind closed doors, they were strangers. Conversations were clipped, revolving around schedules or social events. Their touches, once electric, were now rare and heavy with unspoken resentments. Neither was ready to admit how far they'd drifted, clinging to the illusion of a happy marriage rather than facing the emptiness within. Next door, the Morrows had carved out a quieter existence. Margaret Morrow had moved to Willow Creek in 2014, seeking solace after the death of her husband, Dr. Henry Morrow, a beloved oncologist who'd lost his battle with cancer. The move from their modest St. Paul home was meant to escape the ghosts of memory, but Willow Creek's polished streets felt foreign to Margaret. A librarian with a love for novels and roses, she found refuge in her garden, its blooms the envy of the neighborhood. Her son, Ethan, was 14 when they arrived, a gangly, introverted boy who preferred code to conversation. School was a gauntlet of bullies who mocked his thrift store clothes and shy demeanor. It was Nathan Caldwell who stepped in, offering Ethan odd jobs, mowing lawns, washing cars, and quietly mentoring the boy through his awkward years. By 2019, Ethan had transformed. The lanky teen was now a broad-shouldered young man, his intelligence shining in his computer science studies at university. Yet he remained tethered to his mother, worried about her solitude. He'd drive home most weekends, trading frat parties for quiet dinners with Margaret. It was during one of these visits, in early June, that Ethan saw Clara Caldwell in a new light. Margaret often spoke of Clara's kindness, her invitations to book clubs, her homemade casseroles during tough times, unaware of the storm brewing beneath her son's polite smiles. The spark between Clara and Ethan ignited on a sultry evening at the Caldwells' annual summer barbecue. The backyard was alive with laughter, fairy lights twinkling above tables laden with ribs and lemonade. Nathan held court by the grill, his voice booming with tales of his latest deal. Clara, adrift in the crowd, felt the weight of her isolation. She slipped into the pool house to fetch more ice, her heart heavy. Ethan, dragged to the party by Margaret, sought refuge from the noise. He stepped into the pool house, not knowing Clara was there. Their eyes locked as she struggled with a heavy bag of ice. He rushed to help, their hands brushing. The air crackled, the chill of the ice a stark contrast to the heat blooming between them. Clara's husky, "Thank you," broke the silence, and Ethan, usually so eloquent, stammered in response. That fleeting moment set a dangerous course. Over the next weeks, Clara and Ethan found excuses to cross paths. It began innocently, Clara asking Ethan to fix her laptop, Ethan offering to weed her garden. Each encounter pulsed with an attraction they tried to deny. Their first kiss came a month later, during a sudden summer storm. They'd been setting up for Clara's yoga class in the park when rain unleashed its fury. Laughing, they ran to a gazebo, their clothes clinging to their skin. Clara looked at Ethan, his wet hair falling into his eyes, and felt a desire she hadn't known in years. She leaned in, and their lips met, the rain a curtain around their secret. From that moment, their affair spiraled into reckless abandon. They stole moments in shadowed corners, at the back of the local theater, in the library's forgotten stacks, and, most dangerously, in the Caldwell home when Nathan was at work. Each tryst fueled their hunger, the 24-year age gap forgotten in the heat of their passion. Clara felt alive again, rediscovering a fire she thought had died. Ethan was intoxicated by Clara's experience and the thrill of the forbidden. But as summer deepened, the cracks in their secrecy widened. A neighbor nearly caught them in an embrace. Margaret's eyes narrowed when Clara's name came up too often. Guilt gnawed at them, Ethan, betraying the man who'd mentored him, Clara, weaving lies to Nathan with every breath. Yet the pull of their desire was stronger than their remorse, blinding them to the storm on the horizon. July 15, 2019, dawned with a suffocating heat, the sky bruised with the promise of thunder. Nathan rose early, his tailored suit a second skin as he left for Pinnacle, his mind on a client dinner that could clinch his partnership. Clara woke later, her pulse quickening as she texted Ethan, inviting him over while Nathan was gone. Ethan, wrestling with guilt, saw the message as a chance to end things. He replied with a curt, "Okay," steeling himself for the conversation ahead. The day dragged on, heavy with anticipation. Clara's yoga class was a blur, her usual calm replaced by a jittery edge. Ethan, at his summer coding job, stared blankly at his screen, his thoughts consumed by Clara. At 2:30 p.m., Ethan slipped into the Caldwell home, his heart pounding as he scanned the street for prying eyes. Clara greeted him with a fevered kiss, misreading his hesitance as desire. "We need to talk," he began, but her lips silenced him, her need overwhelming his resolve. They stumbled to the master bedroom, clothes falling in a frantic trail. Across town, Nathan sat in his office, his jaw tight as he stared at a spreadsheet. The numbers weren't adding up, and the client presentation was at risk. Frustration boiled over. He grabbed his keys, deciding to head home, regroup, and return later. It was a decision that would change everything. At 3:45 p.m., Nathan's BMW purred into the driveway. He noticed Ethan's battered Civic parked down the street but shrugged it off, probably running an errand for Margaret. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. A half-empty wine glass sat on the coffee table, odd for Clara at this hour. Then he heard it, a muffled sound from upstairs, like a sigh or a moan. His stomach twisted. He climbed the stairs, each step heavier, the sounds growing clearer. When he pushed open the bedroom door, the world stopped. There, in their bed, was Clara, his Clara, entwined with Ethan Morrow, the boy he'd treated like a son. A primal roar tore from Nathan's throat. He lunged, yanking Ethan off the bed. Clara screamed, scrambling for the sheets, her voice a desperate plea. "Nathan, stop." But he was beyond reason, his fists, trained for handshakes and signatures, now weapons of rage. The first punch cracked against Ethan's jaw, sending him reeling. Ethan, fueled by fear, fought back, and the room became a battlefield. Furniture toppled, picture frames shattered, and a heavy crystal bookend teetered on the dresser. In a blind fury, Nathan grabbed it, swinging with a force he didn't know he possessed. The sickening thud as it struck Ethan's skull echoed in the sudden silence. Ethan crumpled, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes vacant. Clara's scream shattered the stillness, a sound raw with horror. Nathan stood frozen, the bookend slipping from his hand. Outside, storm clouds burst, rain lashing the windows as sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors peeked through blinds, drawn by the commotion. The police arrived to a scene of chaos, Nathan, bloodied and dazed, sitting on the bed, Clara, hysterical, clutching a sheet, and Ethan, motionless on the floor. Detective Lauren Carter, a seasoned homicide investigator, took charge. Paramedics fought to save Ethan as Carter began unraveling the nightmare. Nathan was cuffed without a fight, his eyes hollow. Clara, trembling, was questioned separately, her words tumbling out in sobs. The news spread like wildfire. Margaret Morrow collapsed when told her son was in critical condition, rushed to the hospital where Ethan fought for life. Forensics teams scoured the Caldwell home, bagging the bloodied bookend and photographing the wreckage. Neighbors whispered their shock, one recalled hearing shouts, another saw Ethan arrive that afternoon. At 9:47 p.m., Ethan was pronounced dead, his injuries too severe. Nathan's charge escalated to second-degree murder, and Willow Creek reeled from the loss of its innocence. In the days that followed, Clara's confession laid bare the affair, her tearful statement mapping the timeline of stolen moments. Nathan, advised by his attorney, James Whitaker, stayed silent, but his colleagues spoke of a man stretched thin by ambition. Detective Carter pieced together a story of a marriage eroded by neglect, a woman starved for connection, and a young man caught in a fatal web. The community grappled with grief and judgment, their idyllic suburb forever stained. 6 months later, the trial began in a red-brick courthouse, reporters swarming like vultures. Prosecutor Emily Hargrove opened with a searing portrait of Nathan as a man consumed by jealousy, his rage snuffing out a young life. Whitaker countered, painting Nathan as a betrayed husband driven to a tragic mistake. Witnesses took the stand, forensic experts detailing the fatal blow, neighbors recounting the day's events, and Clara, whose testimony was a raw confessional. She spoke of her crumbling marriage, her reckless affair, and the moment her world collapsed. Under cross-examination, Whitaker tried to cast her as the catalyst, but Clara's grief held firm. She owned her mistakes but refused to justify murder. Margaret's testimony was a quiet devastation, her words about Ethan's kindness and dreams breaking hearts in the gallery. Nathan's decision to testify, against Whitaker's advice, was a gamble. His voice wavered between remorse and defiance, recounting the pressures of work, the sting of betrayal, and the blackout of rage. He swore he hadn't meant to kill, but his words rang hollow against the image of Ethan's lifeless body. Expert witnesses added layers to the tragedy. Dr. Rachel Kim, a psychologist, described Nathan's outburst as a possible symptom of intermittent explosive disorder, triggered by stress and betrayal. Dr. Paul Brennan, a family therapist, likened Clara's infidelity to a psychological earthquake, capable of shattering a spouse's identity. The jury listened, torn between sympathy and horror. After 7 weeks, Judge Evelyn Harper sent the jury to deliberate. The courtroom held its breath. When the verdict came, Nathan was found guilty of second-degree murder. Harper, balancing the crime's brutality with Nathan's clean record, sentenced him to 18 years, with parole possible after 12. As Nathan was led away, Clara's sobs mingled with Margaret's silent tears. Outside, Willow Creek buzzed with divided opinions. Some saw justice, others saw a man broken by betrayal. But all agreed, the scars of that day would linger. And yet, as the gavel fell, whispers of a twist, a revelation no one saw coming, hung in the air, a secret poised to upend everything. What it was, no one could say, but it promised to haunt Willow Creek long after the headlines faded.